Hello, and welcome back to In Conversation With, the podcast series from the team behind the Global Cosmetics newsfeed. Today we're focusing on color cosmetics, a category long driven by creativity, self-expression, and trend-led innovation, but one now navigating a far more uncertain global environmental in 2026. As the beauty industry enters the year, color cosmetics was focused for renewed growth, fueled by social commerce, accessible luxury, and continued demand for products that combine performance with individuality. But much of that optimism came before renewed global tensions and economic uncertainty reshaped the global outlook. Today, brands, consumers, and manufacturers are operating in a more complex market, one defined by cautious spending, supply chain pressures, and rapidly evolving consumer expectations. At the same time, sustainability, ingredient transparency, and regulatory scrutiny are becoming increasingly important across the category, from natural pigments and bio-based materials to questions around packaging, sourcing, and compliance. The industry is being challenged to rethink how innovation is delivered. So how can color cosmetic brands remain predictive, protective, and planet positive in a market where resilience and responsibility matter just as much as creativity? That's what we'll be exploring today. I am delighted to be joined by Jane Palmer, CEO of Natural Coatings, bringing expertise in sustainable color innovation and bio-based pigments; Elodie Carpentier, General Manager and co-founder of Rouge, Français, offering a brand-led perspective on botanical beauty, luxury positioning, and natural formulations; and Shiyan Zering, Senior Research Analyst at Mintel, sharing insights into consumer behavior, market trends, and the future direction of the color cosmetics sector. Thank you all for joining me. Let's start with consumers, because color cosmetics has always reflected broader cultural and economic shifts. In 2026, consumers are balancing self-expression and experimentation with growing price sensitivity and higher expectations around value, transparency, and performance. Shiyan, from a consumer insight perspective, what are the biggest behavioral shifts shaping the color cosmetics market right now? And where are the key opportunities and risks for brands and retailers?
I think according to our consumer behavior data that we've collected in 2026, as you mentioned and touched on, is makeup is increasingly value-led, with mass brands outperforming prestige brands in terms of value sales. And also 33% of UK makeup buyers say cheaper alternatives would encourage them to try new products. So that really reinforces that discovery is driven by perceived value and not just innovation alone. So that means our data is showing that value is very multidimensional and not just price-based. Consumers are still engaging with makeup more actively, but they're editing routines more aggressively. So products that crease or feel uncomfortable or fail to last are not just deprioritized, they're completely abandoned in routines, which raises the stakes of first use of products. And this is particularly challenging for prestige brands where expectations are much higher and failure risks long-term rejection of a brand. And then at the same time, there's a really clear shift towards trust over experimentation. And this is because, as you mentioned, the market is extremely saturated. And although that saturation hasn't necessarily killed experimentation in makeup, 80% of consumers prefer sticking to products that already work for them and that they already trust, which indicates that product awareness is less of a barrier, but confidence and trial is becoming much more selective and deliberate. But these factors really create quite a strong opportunity where growth could come from solving everyday frustrations. So things like shade matching, wear, fit, ease of use. Rather than expanding ranges for the sake of it or chasing trends, brands really must reduce friction across the entire usage experience, from application guidance to wear performance, routine simplification, which in turn will turn trial into habit. And then brands will see success in making makeup a lot easier to trust, use, and repurchase.
And Jane, how are changing consumer expectations influencing demand for natural and alternative pigments?
I think it's the same thing that was just mentioned. It's very much value driven, while also having the demand for safer ingredients. We were just at the NYSEC Suppliers Day show last week, and we had a booth there. And one of my favorite experiences was a group of students came to our booth from Rutgers University, and they were so educated, so much more educated than I was when I was that age. They know everything about every individual ingredient. And they were saying, we want bio, we want non-toxic. We know all about carbon black. We know about all the toxins. And so from our perspective, from an ingredient company, is that they want the transparency. They don't want the claims. They want the proof behind it. But they also want it at the same price. And that's something that we've worked really hard to achieve. I feel so strongly that sustainability and non-toxic materials should not only be for luxury, it should be for everybody. Everybody should have access to that type of technology and that type of safety. So that's where we really position ourselves.
And Elodie, from a premium brand perspective, how are you seeing ideas around luxury, authenticity, and sustainability evolving within the color cosmetics sector?
Yes, I think that in the market, the habits change really fast. And we had a huge wave of innovation and new brands coming from healthcare and cosmetic care part like skincare. But in makeup, we don't have a good wave of clean beauty brands coming. And we are still using a lot of non-sustainable or controversial ingredients in formulation. And I think that the customer now really want to have that as a standard. As my partner just said, I think that today young people are really educated. They can hold the formulation with application on their phone. And they really want to have organic or non-toxic, as you say, the formulation and final product. So I think that the demand is huge, but brands are still not coming in color cosmetics. So in Rouge Français, as a co-founder and biotech engineer, I really wanted to change the game of this industry and to propose to this new generation, but also as a generation that used conventional brands since ever, to make any compromise on health and sustainability in the luxury world. Because today, the performance is a must-have when you are in luxury and prestige brands. But the organic, non-toxic ingredients, we can translate that Cosmos organic or natural certification, vegan, but no controversial ingredients, such as titanium dioxide. We can discuss a lot about that because in color cosmetics, we have this coverage ingredient everywhere, which is forbidden in food industry. And they don't want to have that anymore. And it's become also a standard. As my colleague just previously said, young people want to have the proof, same price, and sustainability non-toxic as a standard.
Indeed, they do. Innovation in color cosmetics is increasingly be shaped by material science, formulation advancement, and digital engagement. Shiyan, what technical developments are having the greatest impact on how consumers discover and purchase color cosmetic products?
I think what we've been noticing really is that technology is becoming very central to reducing purchase uncertainty. And I think one of the key challenges we've noticed in the purchase journey is that the purchase journey itself is now fully fragmented. So consumers might discover a product on TikTok, they might validate it online through traditional search engines or even AI chat bots, and then end up purchasing that product in stores. So the brands don't really control a single touch point. And as a result, brands really need to engage across multiple touch points and engage much earlier through social media like TikTok Shop or TikTok ads in order for brands to really stick in consumers' minds. But then at the same time, there's really a massive risk of tech overload. And in a saturated market, adding tools or tech without clarity can increase a lot of friction rather than reduce it. But what we've noticed is when executed well, technology plays a really clear role in de-risking decisions. So some kind of really key areas that are gaining a lot of traction is developments in store diagnostics, which I think previously haven't been the best. I used to work at MAC Cosmetics on the counter, and even the virtual try-on tools would always be a little bit iffy. But recently, we've been noticing more faster and accurate results diagnostic tools. For example, Clarins just launched a AI shade finder that uses smartphone-based light analysis to identify undertones and improve match accuracy in just under a minute. So that would improve conversion rates. Social commerce platforms are increasingly acting as educational hubs, particularly when led by credible experts. MAC Cosmetics recently joined TikTok Shop and uses their global makeup artist trainers to promote products and also educate consumers joining their live stream. So that's a really interesting use of tech. But then another side of this is AI-powered recommendations. There was some really interesting stats in our recent report that people are really using ChatGPT, Google Gemini, AI chatbots to recommend products for them in experimenting and finding new products. But what I noticed recently is in the US specifically, Sephora just announced a pilot of their app that has ChatGPT integrated into it, which can highlight how product discovery can become more and more integrated into everyday decision-making and offer personalized recommendations based on shopper profiles. So that would improve the shopping experience completely because it would be really tailored to what they need. And then on the formulation side, what we've been noticing for tech is innovation being driven by biotech ingredients that we mentioned before. I think the most interesting ones are lab-grown pigments and biofermented actives. Debut as a company has been doing a really interesting amount of work in this space, especially with biotech alternatives to carmine. And then a really interesting brand that I feel like is quite niche at the moment is focusing on microbiome friendly and skin health positioning within makeup. It's a brand called Biotech Beauty that was founded by a cosmetic scientist that combines biotechnology with high performance makeup to support skin and microbiome health, which I think is a really interesting innovation and really interesting example of what's happening in the biotech space.
And Jane, what advances are taking place in sustainable pigment technology and how are they changing what's possible for manufacturers?
Yeah, I think with everything that was just said, I think AI is obviously taking over rapidly how we approach a lot of different things technology-wise. And in terms of formulation, what I get excited about with AI, well, to take a step back, historically formulating something new with R&D, again, we're an ingredient company. We're supplying bio-based pigments for color cosmetics and personal care. And it takes years. We send a sample to a product developer. They have to test it. It goes through real-time testing. And I think all of those things will still need to happen. But what that can lead to is a product taking 2 or more years to end up on a shelf. And I think that consumers' awareness is changing so quickly that brands don't really have 2 years of time to have something new on the shelf that consumers are demanding now. So I think that AI can really help in the lab and in formulations to help speed up that process. In terms of other biopigments, I think we really focus on Black bio-based pigments. And so we know a lot and think a lot about carbon black and iron oxides. And from a technology perspective, I know we're going to talk about regulations coming up a little bit, but it's so important for the biopigments to be non-nano so they can't transfer through the skin barrier. That seems like such a simple thing, but that's such an important technological advancement, I would say. So iron oxides have been taking up that space, but they can cast a grayish hue. And so it's being able to find something that has that performance, has that blackness, but also has the safety, doesn't pass through the skin barrier, and can also include additional benefits like cleansing or detoxifying attributes. So it's really about finding and developing ingredients that can service so many different things across the needs of the consumer. So it's like combining color, performance, and skin health or lash health. And I see that's where a lot of the technology is moving towards and where biopigments can really solve a lot of those consumer demands, really.
And Elodie, how is formulation innovation helping brands deliver both performance and natural credibilities in color cosmetics?
To start with R&D, it's true that we make a lot of months of delay to source and to make the selection of ingredients of plants because Le Rouge Français have a worldwide innovation using dye plants as sustainable pigments. And I went to Sri Lanka to meet with the local population, understand how they preserve the biodiversity, or are they harvesting with different techniques and organic culture and labels. So it takes time, but how we can source and make the selection of raw material with 1 or 2 prompts on ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and so on. with IA. And in fact, it's true that we can build a full brand through your desk and not traveling. Same for formulation. My colleague also mentioned it, but in the past, you need to have 12 to 1 year and a half of development in terms of months. But now, within a time frame of 4 months, you can develop your own formulation with advanced tools to build your frame of formulation, to add your active, to source all your ingredient provider. So it's moving really fast. And it's true that for, let's say, the rest of the department, not only R&D, but in general, when you manage a brand for the product marketing study, we had to partner with external people now with really tech young people that we integrate internally. In some weeks, you have a full study for consumer analysis, KPI of market, to make sure that you launch the good scientific product, but that we will reach your target and your customer. So it's really powerful. And I saw all this moving era just, the last month. You mentioned also the multiple touch point of a brand. It's not only digital and all the digital reference with IA, the different digital tools, but it's also in retail to make more drive-to-store experience and to also decrease the friction point with all this technology. So I'm really aligned that it helped a lot and it evolved really fast with the different algorithms that the big IA tools developed.
Yeah, indeed, it has done. Environmental pressures continue to intensify across the beauty industry, and color cosmetics is no exception. Consumers are increasingly scrutinizing ingredients, sourcing practices, and packagings, while brands face pressure to balance sustainability with product performance and profitability. Shiyan, how important are sustainable credentials in purchasing decisions today, and how is that evolving?
Sustainability is a bit of an interesting one because it should be important. And I want to preface that before I start to say what consumers feel about it. But essentially, what we've been noticing is sustainability in color cosmetics is really increasingly being shaped by regulation and consumer expectations around performance. And according to our data, consumers are not necessarily prioritizing sustainability in isolation. They're evaluating it alongside efficacy and value, as you mentioned. And that makes to them more generic clean beauty or green claims much less meaningful as it becomes more of a baseline expectation and kind of risks sometimes a bit of a greenwashing perspective from them, which is essentially them thinking that it's just a marketing gimmick, or again, their kind of priorities are more performance and value led. So they need to be hand in hand, and they won't prefer a product because it's sustainable. They would prefer it if it was high performing. So it needs to equate to each other. But what I think from a product perspective is an overlooked and under-discussed issue is product waste driven by poor performance. So products, as I mentioned before, that fail to match skin, wear well, feel comfortable, are more likely to be abandoned. And particularly with the rise of trial formats like minis, it's almost like a candy store when it comes to makeup, but it also makes it completely disposable and very easy to get rid of products. So to me, what was obvious from the kind of data points was that it positions performance as a hidden sustainability lever where better performing products would equate to lower disposal rates and makes it a much stronger alignment between environmental and functional value. And I'm sure Elodie and Jane can speak more to the regulatory pressures, but obviously what we've been noticing is a big challenge for brands is regulatory pressures, particularly in the EU, which is increasing complexity such as talc-free or microplastic-free formulation changes, which increases the rates of reformulating products, which there's been a lot online discourse in terms of reformulating products that are beloved, especially talc-free. It's a bit of a difficult one for me to talk about because I love talc products because I'm quite an oily-faced girl, and I don't think I found products that work as well as, the original Studio Fix or the original One Size Powders. And I think there's a lot of conversation happening around that. And it shows that the discourse isn't necessarily caring so much about the talc-free element. It's just how is it impacting the performance of my products? And obviously, these increasing reformulations and repackaging costs are likely slowing down innovation, which puts pressure on development pipelines. So overall, I think this makes opportunity for transparent communication really critical, where brands really need to clearly explain changes, especially to reformulated products that are beloved. This can in turn build trust, where poor communication risks a lot of confusion.
Jane, what are the biggest environmental challenges facing color innovation and pigment sourcing?
I would say the biggest challenges are transparency and costs. And as was just mentioned, reformulating entire products, not having drop-in replacements and performance. So a lot of risk. I get it. Bio-based materials, natural-based materials have a bad rap. To be honest, out in the world, they're thought to be higher priced and lower performing. And so that's the uphill battle that we are challenged with every day, I would say, in our company, because we know that price and performance are the most important things to a consumer and to a brand. And then we just put the values of our company within that mix. We only want to use very fully traceable bio-based materials, non-toxic, non-carcinogenic. We don't add PFAS to make it waterproof or high performing, and it has to be super black. So we talk about this topic all the time. One of the things that I think is really important is just because it's bio-based doesn't mean it's better. I can take palm oil, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with as an example. They'll cut down rainforests to grow palm oil. That's not a sustainable or positive solution. So from our perspective, what we do is we're very transparent on where all of our materials are sourced. We only use FSC certified wood waste. It's all coming from within 200 miles of our facility. So it's coming from very close by, which also de-risks our supply chain. We don't have to import any materials. We're not dependent on gas prices or oil prices or tariffs or things like that. And then it's all waste products. So it's like the little branches and bark that can't be used for paper or lumber. And that becomes our feedstock. And then we do probably more than necessary lab testing and data testing because we really want to prove that it's not greenwashing. And that comes from more of a personal, kind of my own moral standpoint than anything else. I really just believe that we don't have to cause personal health harm or environmental harm to get a really nice black mascara. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so we've worked really hard to get it to the right price, the right performance, while having all the transparency and really de-risking supply chains for our customers.
And Elodie, how can brands build credibility around sustainability without losing the emotional and aspirational aspect that defines color cosmetics?
For me, the sustainability part and what you mentioned on regulatory is really key and linked. And you mentioned also the regulatory pressure in Europe with also the omnibus regulation. So it's coming and I'm really happy about that. But when I developed the brand 7 years old ago, when I was pregnant, and I started the proof of concept and R&D research, I really wanted to make no compromise on health of people when I developed the brand. And it's true that as a biotech engineer and coming from pharmaceutical environment, I fight for the health of people. And when you are pregnant, you really realize that you can have in your daily routine a lot of controversial ingredients, like titanium dioxide that I mentioned earlier on. And I wanted to offer a technology solution and ingredient formulation that can care the health of people and the skin, even if we are in a playful environment with color and that we want also to cover some issues on skin and so on. The idea of today go beyond the regulation and to propose performance that is equivalent to conventional brand with petrochemical ingredients and pigments was really to make no compromise on health, but also on desirability of products. Because we know that this performance, as also you mentioned earlier, is a must-have. And the brand can't exist on the market if they don't have sustainable, really strong shade and variety on shade for a different type of person. But also the texture, which is not dry, because, for example, usually in organic, certified product, you can have dried formulation. And here it's really moisturizing. And we had also a health active like probiotic or hyaluronic acid, which is also patent, and that we wanted to add active ingredient for your skin in addition to color. And also the lasting, to have the same performance in terms of lasting than petrochemical pigments. As you know, I was fighting during all my career on the health, but I also wanted to be at G20. So I was selected as a French entrepreneur to represent the sustainability and health recommendation in South of Africa in G20 committee to push recommendation to our leader and to change the shape of the industry and to go really further and to propose new regulation. So I'm really happy that it's moving. You mentioned to microplastic formulation or talc-free or PFAS. I developed the first French association with other cosmetic brands, but also from textile, from automotive and so on, to fight for disruptive hormone that will be forbidden in few months, years, let's say. And titanium dioxide is from the regulatory ANSES now observed as a disruptive hormone ingredient. So I'm really proud to now propose an alternative and technology that can change the industry. So I develop a brand, but in the future, we want to license our 15 patents that we developed. We have our own laboratory internal, and we are really wanted to help really to change the industry. Even if we are still young, we know that we have strong partners, that we can go fast. And the financial industry also want to support that. So yeah, the world is changing and we are really proud to be part of that.
So back to regulations. The regulatory landscape for beauty is becoming increasingly complex, particularly around ingredients, claims, and environmental compliance. Shiyan, how are market and regulatory shifts influencing consumer trust and brand positioning in color cosmetics?
I would say the regulatory shifts aren't necessarily my area of expertise, but I wanted to come at this from a market perspective angle where the category it's definitely becoming more challenging as we're noticing growth overall is very positive but quite moderate. And we're seeing a very clear shift towards mass brands outperforming prestige brands, largely because they're prioritizing affordability alongside performance. So many brands like NYX, Cosmetics, or L'Oreal are delivering those types of products very effectively. But what we've been noticing really from a market shift perspective is competition from 8 adjacent categories. So things like lip care, self-tan, professional treatments like lash and brow lifts and nail treatments taking over traditional makeup occasions. So they're offering more longer lasting and more caring results that replicate professional results or outcomes at home. And what we've been noticing in the market shift is some really interesting, higher performing kind of skincare actives in makeup. I think it was Maybelline very recently. It was a Philippines launch. It hasn't launched in UK, US kind of markets, but they have a concealer in their Fit Me range that has anti-acne ingredients in there, as well as instant coverage, which is quite critical, I think, to justify premium pricing and extend makeup's relevance across wear occasions, because it clearly communicates long-term skin benefits. And I think that's really quite integral. And I think that those are the types of things that are going to shift the market more significantly into driving more justifying premium pricing. For regulatory shifts, just from what we've been seeing, again, I think Elodie and Jane can speak much more eloquently than I can about this stuff. But as mentioned before, stricter ingredient rules in the EU are affecting innovation. And one of the most notable recently is expansion of EU fragrance allergen labelings. So increasing the number of substances that must be disclosed and driving reformulation and transparency across categories. And these are tightening regulations around ingredients and preservatives and pigments, which, as we mentioned before, really increases the cost and complexity of formulation and slows down the pace of innovation. So all in all, market and regulatory shifts are reinforcing a move towards fewer and better products, more transparent communication on reformulations, and then a much stronger emphasis on proven performance of longer lasting products to prove value overall.
And Jane, how are evolving regulations affecting innovation and ingredient development in the color cosmetic space?
For us, and probably for a lot of other companies, regulations are very helpful because we're able to start from the beginning. We're not trying to take an existing ingredient and change it to fit existing regulations. We have the ability and this opportunity to look at where regulations are going and start the development right then from that perspective. So from my perspective, I think it's a really exciting time for innovation. And I do agree with our colleagues here on the call that it is causing delays in R&D. But I also think that there's a lot of drop-in replacements that are already existing, that are new and innovative, that don't require changing formulations. And that was something that we know is really important to our customers. We know that price and performance, and a drop-in replacement are the keys to success, because it's also really challenging for startups like ours to gain momentum in the marketplace. It starts really slow. There's a period where we have to go through building trust that we can deliver the same product, and that every time, as was just mentioned, with shade variations or something like that, and that we can meet the right price and that we can deliver on time. So there's a lot of different factors going into the timeline for innovation. So we try to make it as easy as possible we're actually underpriced. We're underpriced from carbon black and iron oxide. So we're cheaper. That's a really good hook, I would say. And we can prove right away that our performance is better. It's better than iron oxides, and it matches carbon blacks. And then it doesn't contain the nanoparticles or PFAS. Something else is all carbon black is coated in PFAS to make it waterproof, and we don't have to do that. And from my perspective, the regulations really help startups like ours and allow for exciting innovation.
And Elodie, from a brand perspective, how do you navigate compliances while still maintaining creativity and difference?
I had the chance to be a brand and not a big luxury historical brand. I had the chance to make it right first time. So even if the regulation is moving fast, and as I said, we anticipate some regulation pressure, and especially for pigment, because our innovation, as I mentioned, is to really find alternative to the 99% of pigment on the market, which is petrochemical. And we developed a full range of product and a brand with color, botanical, pigment-based. And we had also the chance to select the highest quality label on the market with Cosmos Organic and Cosmos Natural certified by EcoCert, which is worldwide well-known. And we decided to go behind. So yes, we are in continuous improvement, and we know that the regulation is still evolving, but I had the chance to be still emerging and to add this right first time momentum. I know that big companies have really major R&D investment and internal laboratory, and they can make huge thing in terms of sustainability, but it's a lot of investment and years to change and retro-engineering full range of brands. So yeah, I find me really lucky on that. But it's true also that the regulatory constraints lead to innovation, and not only on formulation or specific point of differentiation like vegetal pigment and dye plants, but on whole the value chain, and to have a holistic approach in terms of also sustainability on packaging. We mentioned the microplastic and PFAS. You can have the better formulation ever, but if you are using a plastic that reload, that give you some disruptive hormone inside of the formulation, it will decrease the clean aspects of your formulation. So we decided to launch also innovation, and that we patent on packaging using bio-based with castor oil material that I find in airplane industry, and that we design on mold to have also a refill aspect and sustainability aspect. Or also to use glass, because we know that in color cosmetic, we have a lot of plastic packaging, but here in glass, it's still affordable. We find good sourcing, but it's really healthy, and we have no leachable, extractable, and interaction between the packaging and the formulation. So yeah, these constraints for me really lead to innovation, and it's a proof because now we have the product developed, and we can launch a new product from scratch in 4 months, which is really amazing for a young startup. And we develop the market on 12 countries now. So we comply to at least some regulation authorities. We developed the new LLC in the US. So we are in the retail with Neiman Marcus, Credo Beauty, which is really focused on clean beauty brands, and in some days in Dillard's. So big US market for us with the FDA regulation. We also deployed product in Middle East, where we were awarded Sustainable Brand of the Year Middle East last year. And we had a good distributor over there. And even China, where we developed Airplane. We developed also Harmei concepts in retail, which is in several countries in China and Asia. Yes, this pressure of regulation and the worldwide change is really a good opportunity for a brand, I think. After, you need to be reactive. For example, you mentioned talc-free. We are in it because I consider also that talc was really good for 4 years and a half ago. But now I'm still convinced that we need to change it. And for Middle East and China, since a couple of weeks, the hemp oil, which is natural ingredient, the hemp is forbidden. So we need to retro-engineer also some formulation.
And to close, I'd like to ask each of you to share your top 3 predictions for the color cosmetics market in 2026. Shiyan, from a consumer and market perspective, what should the industry be preparing for?
This was quite fun to think about, to be honest. I think my top 3, I'd say, because I think there's a lot happening in this space. It's very exciting to think about. But first and foremost, I cannot stress enough performance across the board. But over the long term, success will be defined less by trend relevance and more by consistent performance across skin types, conditions, and environments. I feel like these are still massive white spaces that I think consumers are showing growing interest in. For example, makeup users aged 25 to 34 are most likely to say that a change in their skin has made the products they use less effective, which is likely driven by hormonal shifts, stress, pregnancy, post-pregnancy, lifestyle changes, and early signs of aging. And this makes skin much less predictable than it was in their teens or their early 20s and may make them distrust products they built trust in during that time frame. And even social media trends like glass skin, for example, don't work very well on those with sensitive or oily skin or in hotter climates or blemish-prone skin. So consumers are really focused on whether something actually truly works in real-life factors. So as we mentioned before, growth is really going to be driven by products that solve clear and real consumer frustrations like improving wear, comfort, shade accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing a lot of these types of products becoming the trending products at the moment. So Wonder Skin and Sashu lip stains, for example, are shown to stay on your lips even when you're eating or drinking. And we're seeing mass market brands even try and emulate this. I think Maybelline very recently launched their own peel-off lip stains. So true long-lasting performance in this instance and showing how it works in real-life factors is really going to be capturing consumer attention and continue to do so. I think second that I think is a bit of a white space is anti-aging claims in face makeup. To our global new product database where we track beauty launches globally, they're projected to grow over the next 2 to 5 years as the category starts to begin to follow skincare's lead. And in facial skincare, for example, claims like plumping and firming are gaining a lot of traction. And similar language, I think, in color cosmetics can help differentiate brands as consumers look for makeup that supports aging skin rather than simply covering it. And where we're seeing early signals of this is emerging K-beauty inspired ingredients entering makeup. There's a brand called Unleasha that launched a berry shot lip tint with spicules, which are like these microneedle ingredients that are positioned to maintain smoothness and fullness and anti-aging benefits. So building credibility for anti-aging claims by keeping pace with ingredients in facial skincare will align a little bit more better with longevity goals and skin aging concerns. And then lastly, the maybe more fun note is we're seeing the budding beginnings of makeup becoming far more fun again, which like playful maximalism coming through in pop culture and music artists like Zara Larsson, Blackpink, Tyla, and even makeup brands getting on board with this. I was very personally excited by Marc Jacob coming back into makeup and its initial kind of marketing campaigns and packaging shows that it's not afraid of color, especially at a prestige kind of place. Playful packaging to get people excited about wearing makeup again in a way that's more individualistic and fun rather than conforming to the more rigid beauty standards that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, which as an ex-makeup artist, I'm very excited about. So I'm looking forward to seeing that develop in the next year or so.
Exciting. And Jane, what changes do you expect to see in sustainable materials and color innovation over the next coming years?
Good question. I believe that it's going to be in terms of the trends that we focus on, because we're an ingredient brand and not so consumer facing, the input that we're getting from customers is about mainly around de-risking supply chain. And so that's going to be about the current global war in Iran and increased in oil prices. And for our customers, particularly, especially the ones that we were talking to last week in New York, a lot of pigments are coming from China. And the fact that we make our pigments in the US was a huge selling point because they can be more local and more secure. And as I was mentioning before, our products are not dependent on oil prices. We source everything from within 200 miles and we use renewable energy to create our pigments. So our prices aren't going to fluctuate. A lot of different ingredient suppliers out there have already increased their prices 4 to 5 times this year alone. So we can really offer that price stability. And as we've been mentioning this whole conversation, value is so important to customers right now. So we can offer that price stability more than the larger chemical companies at this point. It's also about creating something that's a drop-in replacement that's really easy to use, that doesn't require fancy equipment or extra capex at a factory, but it can be easier to use. So we've had a lot of feedback from our customers that they've tried, for example, 16 different bio-based black pigments, and ours is the most stable and the most easy to use and the easiest to blend into all of their materials. So it's just going to be a winner because it's easier to use and a better drop-in replacement. I think other trends are going to be moving away from petroleum-based ingredients. I agree that price and performance are the most important things in the marketplace for sure. And I do think there's a consumer awareness, especially with the younger generation, of individual ingredients, and they don't want fossil fuels in their makeup, what they're putting on their lips and their mouths and their eyes. And they're looking for bio-based and renewable ingredients. But those have to be backed up by data and not greenwashed. They're very savvy. Consumers are very savvy now. They have access to so much more information than ever before, and they're going to look into it right away. So I think it's about price and performance, full transparency, backing up claims, being very data-driven from an ingredient perspective, eliminating fossil fuels, de-risking supply chain, and creating drop-in replacements.
And Elodie, where do you see the biggest opportunity for premium and natural beauty brands as the categories evolve?
So for me, I think the opportunity in the coming, not years, but months now, will be the change on regulatory that will shift and move the full industry. Again, as I said previously, I think the fact that this pressure, regulatory pressure on controversial ingredients, because a more and more health study is coming with data, will disrupt our industry and make a breakthrough innovation on the market. So I'm really glad that I'm pioneer in dye plants, because I traveled a lot to find the best plants with sustainable sourcing and certification, quality certification, because I know that it will shape the future. So the future will be vegetal, and we need to work with nature. We need to work really with what we are using for century since ever, because Cleopatra, the most beautiful woman on earth, used already dye plants like madder roots to sublimate her skin. The Amazonian population used a lipstick tree seed, which is a plant to help them to protect from the sun and mosquitoes. So we are just using ancestral culture know-how and what they are using since ever, and that works. We developed the commercial color cosmetic products, and we put petrochemical because it was the time of the switch in the industry with petrochemical pigment and ingredients. But now it's a change, and we can go back to using the nature for health, for clothes, and for cosmetics. So for me, the big change will be vegetal color dye plants. The change will be to have certification, quality certification on packaging, really visible, because it's a caution and people are really educated now and they know when it's greenwashing or not, when you put flour on your marketing picture, but you have 1% or less in your formulation, and which is not really the major ingredients. So they know now that certification lead to audit, not only on formulation, but also on packaging, on process and system of the whole company. And it's really, to me, the change to make the hunting of controversial ingredients. And it's moving really fast. So I mentioned again hormone disrupting, but we know a big wave of cancer on issue on healthcare of people. And the young generation want to take care of them. And if they don't want to cancel and make no makeup routines, they know that the brand needs to comply with these needs and to change to preserve the business. So preservation of nature and our Mother Earth, and also the health of population, which is for me the next change.
And with that, we'll wrap up today's episode of Predictive, Protective, Planet Positive Color Cosmetics. A huge thank to Shiyan, Jane, and Elodie for sharing their insights, and to you for listening. As we've heard, color cosmetics in 2026 is being shaped by a combination of creativity, caution, and change. Brands are navigating economic uncertainty and rising operational pressures, while also responding to growing demands for sustainability, transparency, and innovation. Success is the next phase of the market will depend on the ability to balance performance with responsibility and emotions with resilience. We'll be back next month with more insights as we continue to explore the forces shaping the future of the cosmetic and personal care industry. Until then, take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.